Leslie, tell us exactly what somatic yoga is. Like, how is that different? I think the word somatic is kind of trendy right now, and I think people don't truly know what it means, but they know they need it. So tell us a little bit more about what makes it different from just your regular yoga.
Yeah, absolutely. It is so trendy and it's a very popular word right now. And so I'm just going to define it how I've been taught and how I use it when I support my clients and my students through it. So the way that I like to look at somatic yoga is by using the reference point of how they typically may think that yoga is, especially if they've been to a movement or an asana class. So somatic yoga is different in that somatic yoga, the focus is a lot more on building interoception, which is really just learning how to safely connect with sensations, feelings, emotions, thoughts without those things overwhelming you. So, in a typical yoga class, the focus might be more on using your physical body to feel a little bit more relaxed or maybe calm, which is so wonderful. Like a lot of people in our culture and society need that. But somatics may, get you into that state as well. But somatics is going to be a lot more about learning how to allow things in your body to be there. So often, like a lot of us have a disdain for negative emotions. So whether that's like shame or anxiety or anger or sadness, and usually those feelings actually dictate a lot of our energy because we're spending a lot of energy trying to push those things away. And so somatic yoga is about using the technology of yoga to help support more capacity to be with those emotional experiences so that we can actually welcome them in and allow them to just be there. And by doing so, then it no longer overwhelms you. And so somatic yoga is essentially very trauma informed. It really is, to me, a very compassionate way of building safety and reconnection with the body and brain.
Okay, great. So you touched on it a little bit already in terms of anxiety, but get more into like the nitty gritty of how does somatics specifically help with anxiety? So someone who's always pent up, their shoulders are in their ears, they're having maybe tummy trouble all the time because they're just constantly stressed out. How is this type of yoga going to help someone dealing with that chronic state of fight or flight?
Yeah. Anxiety is my jam. Like, I love working with anxiety. And if we look at it from a nervous system education perspective, right, anxiety is often the body's display of our nervous system being in fight, flight, freeze, or faint. And so it's such a beautiful cue. That's why I feel like it's such an underrepresented aspect of people because rightly so, it can be really difficult to be with. But it's a beautiful message that our nervous system is saying like, hey, we're sensing a threat right now and we don't know how to be with this threat. And so that's why when anxiety shows up, a lot of people feel scared, rightly so, right? Because it's a threat that our body is taking in that's letting us know you actually do need to be afraid right now because you might not survive whatever it is that you're experiencing. And so somatic yoga is one, we recognize what's going on. So we start to learn that this is a message. And even just kind of recognizing that this message can be safe when we see it as a message. And then from that, we begin to learn, like, how do we allow this to be in our bodies? And so, for instance, one of the cues that I do when I'm teaching a class is that I'll invite my students to do a movement and do it as fast as you can. So whether we're kind of twisting the body or we're going up and down, and then I'll switch them and I'll say, okay, now do it as slow as you can, like very slow, like you're just like crawling. And then I'll ask them to like now figure out what your body prefers, like what feels good in your body right now. And usually those that have anxiety will tend to want to move faster. And so they just start to notice that, right? because sometimes they don't even notice how fast they're moving until they get an opportunity to be cued a different way and then to swing back into it. So that's how we start to play around with it in somatic yoga, is we give more and more opportunities for people to start to learn about their bodies. And then from that recognition, then we start to introduce choice. Like, does it actually feel good in your body to move that fast? What would it be like to maybe slow down even an inch? Right. And then we use that as a way to start to build more stabilization in the body so that anxiety can then start to shift.
Okay, great. And you're talking about what's kind of what you do in classes and things like that. You have a local workshop coming up, right? Really
Yeah.
big workshop. Tell us more about that.
Yes, I'm so excited. So, in starting January 10th, I'll be hosting it with Jiva Yoga on Hilton Head Island. And it's actually a 7-part series. So, you're welcome to join for one or join all 7. I think obviously you'll get the most of the whole experience if you can join all 7. So, it'll start January 10th, and we meet bi-weekly Saturdays from 2 to 3:30. And we're going to be exploring the 7 chakras. And so we'll be using the technology of the chakras to learn about energy and how to kind of move through those energetic processes that are often tied to emotional experiences. So, for instance, the first one we're going to hit is typically called the root chakra. And usually in the root chakra, it's kind of the bottom of our tailbone, or if we want to think of it, it's a wheelhouse of energy that also is connected to fear and trust. And if we look at it developmentally, again, it's why it's so interesting to me to get connected to the nervous system, because that is how we're first like born into this world. Like, we're in this vulnerable state of, can I be safe in the world around me? And the root of our tailbone is all of that exploration. So we start to play around with movement and finding places maybe in our life where we didn't feel safe, where we are feeling afraid, and how can we provide a little bit more nurture and care so that we can begin to move those fears through us and then build more stability and trust. So that's just the first one. And then
Yeah.
each one we kind of hit different areas. We go through creativity, we go through manifestation, speaking your truth, learning to embrace our inner critic, which I find so important, because we're so often taught to like ignore it or fight it or transform it. And like, gosh, what if we could just learn how to like be with that? And so, yeah, and then we kind of end with this transcending, evolving, and really connecting to mother wound, which is obviously, it can be about our, caregiving and our mother relationship. But to me, it's also Mother Earth and how we've maybe disconnected from our ecosystem and caring for our world.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So a lot of things you're mentioning here, like some buzzwords are trauma informed and emotions, and you mentioned
Mhm.
relationships with your mother and things like that. So how does IFS? I mean, I've heard the term IFS for a very long time, myself being in and out of therapy all my life. But how does IFS, or internal family systems, right? How does that play into what you do in somatics and movement in general?
Yeah. So IFS stands for Internal Family Systems. And I'm level 2 trained in that therapy modality. And so it is a therapy modality. It was created by Dick Schwartz. And again, it's another area I think that's really blossomed. And why I'm really drawn to it is because, to me, it's by far the most compassionate care model that I've ever experienced myself personally and been able to offer to my clients. And so, kind of just a quick summary, which I really refer out to like finding more information if you're interested, but just a snapshot of what it means is that it's a way in which we engage with the internal psyche, and we recognize that we all have parts of our personality that have had to develop over time, whether it's based on our environment or the way we were raised or how we were cared for. And through that, we've developed a sense of our identity, often from these parts of ourselves. And what IFS helps to do is we kind of recognize those parts of us and we establish a relationship with them so that we also begin to distinguish, maybe I'm something more than just this part of me. And when we do that, we start to learn who we really are and how to then engage ourselves in that capacity of being more aligned with who we really are. And so to me, it's just such a beautiful model of helping people learn how to do that, particularly when parts of us are burdened, like with trauma, right? That's a huge way in which people often get stuck in parts having to do certain things for us that often maybe are not the most helpful. For instance, they get into an addictive processy. And so through IFS, we learn to develop a relationship and then heal and maybe even unburden some of those stuck ways that parts of us feel like they have to do in order to keep us safe.
Okay, so keeping all of these things in mind with somatics and movement in your classes and things, breath work, right, is another
Mm,
part of everything that
yeah.
you do. I know some people, including myself at one point in my life, sometimes breath work can kind of cause a little bit of sense of anxiety, like even
Mm.
provoke you even more. It's not necessarily calming. Tell us more about maybe what kind of breath work is the right breath work, or if it's not right for some people, give us some more information on that.
Yeah, yeah. So breath is an important aspect of ourselves, right? Because it is connected to our life force. Like the moment we are born, we take that first breath, we know we're alive. The moment we pass from this world, our breath leaves us. So the breath is essential to who we are. And because it's so essential to who we are, if we experience any trauma in our life, the breath is usually the first indicator that we need to keep ourselves safe. And so the breath will come or go, right? We'll hold our breath. And by doing so, we almost remove ourselves from ourselves in those moments when trauma's occurred. So it makes so much sense to me then if we have that understanding that when we're trying to be with our breath or do, for instance, intense breath work, that stimulates that recognition of trauma, which is if you haven't healed that trauma, that can be really destabilizing for the body. And so I put the utmost care with introducing breath back into a person's being. So, for instance, any person that takes one of my workshops or my classes, I do prefer to even have a little bit of an assessment or a connection with that person so that I know, like, what are you bringing into this space so that I can be a safe container for you? And that way it can help me with the cues that I offer, that I'm not going to stimulate someone into a traumatic internal experience. When also we're looking at breath, offering choice, that it is an invitation. So you can witness the breath by observing what your body does with the breath. You can use a visualization like counting as a way to support how long you want to breathe. And you can use sound. So those are just some ways that I like to be with the breath when I'm working with students or clients.
Okay. And where does journaling play in with all of this? With all of these
Mm,
things, all these
yeah.
healing modalities, where does journaling come in for you and your profession?
Yeah, so journaling, some people love it and some people don't. So I will also
Yes.
throw that out there
Yes.
that it's not
Some
everyone's
people
jam.
hate it's almost traumatic to
Yeah.
tell them that they should journal,
Yeah,
right?
it feels like it
Yeah.
brings back like education. Like I have to sit here and like write something out.
Yeah.
So again, it's just a tool. It's not like the tool. But if it's a tool that works for you, I think that's great. So it's a process that can help support self-reflection. One of the ways that I like to use it in my somatic classes is particularly at the end. So I'll offer like a couple questions to reflect on because in somatics, like we're moving and sometimes we're being with a lot of things. And journaling can be a time of self reflection. So it can offer an opportunity to enhance the material that we've been with and then to integrate and kind of further deepen the work. There's obviously a lot of research out there that something about writing is a process of connection for people. And sometimes we've lost that a bit with technology. So I think that piece of journaling and like seeing what you're writing can be really beneficial. I think another piece is that sometimes it's really hard to speak about certain experiences, and journaling can offer us a safe container to be with that without having to talk about it. And we can also close our journal. We can put our journal away. And to me, that's really important, that we don't have to just like sit with the material. We can put it somewhere and we can look at it when we're ready to. So I think journaling is just a beautiful way of kind of allowing those different aspects of a process to happen.
Yeah, I love that. So right now, I know a lot of people are already feeling it with these winter, dark, cold, dreary months. We're lucky here in the low country,
Yeah.
right? We're a little spoiled
Yeah.
coming from New York. This feels great,
Mhm.
but a lot of us experience really a downshift, maybe a little bit of low grade depression, low energy, maybe even more anxiety in these darker, cooler months. Can you talk
Mhm.
more on the seasonal transition and how it can affect individuals and how they're feeling on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, yeah. I will personally say that I love wintering.
Yep.
So like this season of like getting to slow down and move your body a little slower, like I find such comfort in it. Like when it rains, I'm like,
Mhm.
maybe it's because we live in the low country and it's
Yeah.
not often raining. So it's like, yes, finally I don't have to do anything today.
Yep.
And
I feel the
so
same way. It's funny
right.
you say that. Like,
Yeah.
I'm happy for a rainy day. It's an excuse that we don't have to go outside and be in the sun, which sounds silly,
Yes,
but I get
yes.
what you're
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
saying.
Like, give me a fireplace, give me a warm blanket, a good book, and I'm
Yeah.
I'm like totally there.
Yep.
But I also recognize that sometimes people then can almost feel stuck in that lethargy, especially if there is some shame attached to it, of feeling like there's something wrong with me because I'm not being as productive as I typically am or how I feel like I should. Um, and so Ayurveda is a sister science of yoga. And one of the pieces that Ayurveda really talks about is learning to adapt our beings to the transitions of how like the world and the earth kind of works, right? And so we recognize that there's like, for instance, 4 seasons. The weather changes, and how we can learn to be with that is recognize that our nervous system co-regulates with the seasons if we let it. And so part of that co-regulation that winter does is it slows our body down. And by doing so, if we can allow ourselves to do that too, we actually will often feel better when we can let ourselves move with the season instead of against it and pushing away from it. So for instance, like spring and summer, that's often a time like where there is a little bit more doing energy that's available for you. You can be more creative. If you want to kind of explore new opportunities, right? There's often a lot of that energy kind of available during that time. Whereas fall and winter is very much about moving more inward. And that's also why I think I'm doing these workshops around this time, because to me, it's such an opportunity, like in this inward time, how can you support your process of really learning about yourself?
Yeah.
And so that's how I would support kind of being with the seasons and how to just allow yourself maybe more nurture and care when your body is often telling you what it wants to do, and just don't fight it.
Yeah. So, two more questions that I have more about specifically what you do. So, not
Mhm.
many therapists, social workers incorporate movement into their talk therapy, but
Yeah.
that is something different and exciting that you do that I think a lot of people are open to the idea of it,
Mhm.
because talk therapy alone sometimes is scary for some people. I mean, I can remember sweating through my clothes and,
Mhm.
squeezing everything in my body through a therapy session at times, so like the idea of moving while you do it is really intriguing to me. Tell us more about how you incorporate movement and somatics into your talk therapy and trauma and all those kinds of things.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I think for me, it started with my own personal journey, and very similar. I totally relate to what you're saying as far as like, words have always felt sometimes a little hard to come through, particularly when I was going to therapy, right? Because I just wasn't ready to talk about certain things.
Mhm.
And having a trained therapist who could see that and match my nervous system and almost welcome that in, like, that to me was such a way that my body could learn how to relax in therapy. And so, ways that movement looks is obviously very individual depending on what, my client is the most comfortable with. Because some clients like don't want to move from their chair. They're like, no, I just want to kind of stay right here, which is fine. Then it's about more of like, okay, well, if we want it, like, can you then just be more in the chair?
Mhm.
Like, what would that feel like to relax your tailbone and to actually feel the support that's holding your body in space right now? And so, but then if a client is more open to getting up and moving around, I'll move with them and we'll explore what their body wants to do. In other ways that we look at that is like incorporating internal family systems into it, is knowing that parts may express themselves through our body. And so if we're working with a certain part, I might ask that question, like, how does that part look and move in your body? So for instance, I've got a caregiver part, and after 10 years of like breastfeeding, it's just so natural for my shoulders to want to hunch over. And that feels really normal for that part of me to do that. And so like sometimes it's like, well, actually like this part like would like to move its shoulders, but it just doesn't know if that's allowed. And like kind of it hurts when I do that.
Mhm.
And so then we just kind of gently start to explore different kinds of movement that would be supportive for that area of the body. So it's really this like beautiful relationship of learning that the body is such a form of communication that is allowing you more insight into who you are. So like, let's be with that and explore that and welcome that in. So then you know yourself more. You have more awareness. And therefore, you can decide if it's still necessary to hunch your shoulders over, or are there moments where it might feel good to let your shoulders drop from your ear, stand strong, and be more of that presence in the world?
Awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
So the last question is like the woman who seems to do it all. You do it all. These
Yeah.
workshops, dance classes, yoga studio, therapy, you do it all, but you have one other superpower in healing others, and that is with this candle business that you have, right?
Yeah.
Tell us more about your candle business and how and why. How does that play into everything that you do? Because I know it's connected in some healing type of way, but
Yeah.
tell us exactly how.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to be totally honest, it was very random and like very, I guess, intuitive of how it just like came like a light bulb. And I was like, yes, this is a yes in my body that we're just going to do this. So, I mean, I guess for a while I've thought about like how could I support in a for-profit way some of the mental health needs that are out there. I mean, we obviously know that mental health services are really challenging for times. Using insurance is incredibly difficult. It doesn't make it easier for anyone. And yet, I believe that obviously the best care is having mental health support available to you. And so, the candle aspect of it, I mean, from a somatic perspective, and even from yoga, there's actually a technique of meditation where you stare at a light or a fire. And so to me, there's a somatic presence with candles that have always felt really good to me. Like it always felt like I was caring for myself when I lit a candle. Um, I had to kind of start making my own candles because I suffer through migraines. And so a lot of the candles that are offered just had a fragrance that did not do well in my body. But I loved the experience of it. And so I started just kind of crafting my own candles. And then I like ran with it. This was like the light bulb is that I was like, hey, like, um, you know, I love this idea of like making every space therapeutic. Like, Sure, I get to see clients in a very safe space in my office, but sometimes the greatest challenge for them is like when they go to school, like when they go to work and or when they're in relationships and people don't understand what they're internally experiencing. And so to me, like lighting the candle in spaces is a representation of like how can we make every space therapeutic,
Mhm.
and that is really the message behind the candle that has always been really important to me, is to allow people start to have that conversation. Like I would love to start, working with schools. I did work at a school for a while, and that's a lot of what our community education was. It was a school specifically for individuals with autism and ADHD who are often not well accepted in the community. And so a big part of our work was like going out and making sure that spaces were safe for them and that we could train and work with these environments so that it was more safely held. So that's kind of like what the candle to me represents, is that like every space should feel like therapy. It should feel like that. And how do we make that happen? And so I'm just kind of hoping we're lighting the way for that like vision and
Mhm.
mission. And then, each piece of it is carries kind of some therapy with it, comes with a lovely box. And on the other side of it, it's journal questions. So it's all like a self-reflection. Here's one right here.
Yeah.
So on the back, they all carry a different theme. Like this one is heard and seen just as you are. And then a question is like, what fears do you have around being honest with others? So it's just an opportunity to kind of self reflect,
Yeah.
and light the way to make every space therapeutic.
I love that you're doing such amazing work. This was such a great conversation. I'm so glad that I could be here for this. And thank you so much for having me. And until next time,
Yeah.
we'll see you soon. Bye.